doing today. If you don't know who we are, I am Travis Carr, the president of Escapees RV Club.
And I'm Melanie Carr, vice president of Escapees.
And we're also the founders of Escapers as well. And today we're joined by Brandon Krenza, our brand director and marketing director. I'll give them a little second to introduce themselves as well, but even though I kind of introduced you already.
We do work for you guys, but before that we were club members, community members for many, many years.
Yep. So, and we're full-time RVers, even though we're coming to you live from the White Void right now, while we are hunkered down in a friend's house.
Yeah.
And we boondock quite a bit.
Yeah, so we have a lot of time to the community and being RVers beyond just, working for Escapees.
Yeah.
But we work for Escapees because we are community members and love it so much. So.
Yeah, awesome. So if you don't know what you're watching right now, this is our virtual campfire, and I believe it is our third one, official virtual campfire.
And second time on the Escapees page. They alternate every other week on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Central Time. So today we're on the Escapees page. The next Wednesday, the Wednesday after next, will take place on the Escapers page. And they kind of go back and forth, so look out on those pages for them.
And we kind of try to cover a little bit of everything, from fun interviews to club news to educational information. And today's kind of a little bit of all of that, to be honest. So it's a good topic. With today being Earth Day, I think this topic ties in really well together with our boondocking policy, which is kind of what we're going to kind of focus on today, if everybody agrees that's here.
And that's why we had Brandon and Krenza join us. Not only are they really in tune and they help establish a lot of the marketing stuff for Escapees, they were also really instrumental in helping us put together that boondocking policy, because they are full-timers and they are boondocking all the time, like they said. So we did work together with a lot of people in the community and other industries out there. Companies out in the industry.
Yeah, kind of. Speaking of which, unfortunately, Brian and Lee of Campendium were supposed to join us today as well, but their internet is a little flaky up in Washington right now, and unfortunately, they were not able to make it on with this. But Campendium is one of the supporters of the policy, which is why we were excited to have them on board. But unfortunately, they're not here. Hopefully, they're here in chat and can kind of chime along and conversate and.
If not, they'll catch up later, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, they wouldn't be able to not be on the interview and then be able to follow along on face. That kind of doesn't make sense. But.
Yeah, but they do the same thing. They're hiding out in Washington. Everybody's trying to find a place to stay safe right now. So.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of why this topic, why we're going to talk about it today. Obviously, kind of mentioned Earth Day today, and it really ties in well because boondocking, public lands, all that ties really great into Earth Day and kind of enjoying the land and the beauty of public lands. I mean, don't you guys agree?
No.
Absolutely. I think being out there and boondocking really gets you out and see the environment in Earth. So I would actually like to ask everybody watching a question: and how often do you boondock? Because how often do you boondock and do you get out into these environments in different ways and get to see the Earth in different environments?
Exactly.
60%?
Yeah, it's about 60% of the time. I mean, nature is the reason we started camping. We hiked a lot and had a little pop-up camper, and then we decided to go full-time. So, so being in nature and enjoying nature is the reason we boondock. There's other people have other reasons, but that's our big reason.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a great way to explore the area, kind of see, like we're saying, see and everything. I mean, me and Mel, and we're not full-time RVers, but what we do, we're kind of all over the place, honestly. We kind of do spurts of boondocking or spurts of campgrounds because most of our travel is centered around events, whether it's Escapade, which unfortunately is not going to happen this year, but Escapade or the Convergences, it really kind of depends on where those locations are for us, and kind of, geographically, is it the East Coast, West Coast, or, kind of what is the facilities at the event, and from there. So it kind of really just kind of goes in weird spurts for us, but we do love boondocking.
And I think you guys are right. It's really a way to connect with nature, and I think once you have that first experience getting out there and taking the leap and not hooking up, and you realize, wow, you're kind of out there by yourself, secluded, just surrounded by nature and beauty. There's no going back after that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, it's a scary thought at first, but once you do it, it's like, why am I doing this to start? It looks like Lee and Brian were actually able to connect. I don't know how long they'll be able to hold a connection, but you want to bring them in?
Yeah, if
Yeah,
we
I'd
can see
love
if
to
we can make it
introduce them.
happen.
And sorry if anybody hears our child screaming in the background.
Hey, there they are.
Hey.
Hi guys.
We'll see if
Can y'all hear
How's it
it?
going?
How do we look? Can you see us?
you're a little spotchy, but it's not too bad. We can hear you though.
Okay.
There we go. Great.
We can see you guys fine.
Well, awesome. Well,
Yeah.
we're glad you guys could join in, at least so we can see your faces and put a name with Campendium and kind of some faces with that, even though they might be a little blurry. I think hopefully people can
We
still
might
make that.
drop out of
But we're glad to have you on, and glad that you guys are such supporters of escapees and the boondocking policy. And it's likewise. Obviously, we
course.
love what Campendium and you guys do. You're an awesome resource for everybody, and even through this whole mess going on right now, you guys have done so much for the community. Showing, helping report on campgrounds and all that as well. So really glad you guys are here.
Well, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So we were just
And,
talking
big shout out to Liz on our team.
yeah.
She's been a big part of
Oh,
keeping up with the first. I know Liz and Carenza have been doing a lot of working together on figuring out what's closed. And
We have, and I was saying to her the other day, we haven't talked in a while, and I'm taking that as a good sign.
yeah, it's pretty quiet. And I'd say like, Thursday.
So we were talking about how much we boondock, and I know other people give them percentages, like 10%, about 70. Joanne Cavanaugh says 70, or Canordal says 10. How about you guys? What do you think you do? How much boondocking do you do?
95?
Yeah, I do 95.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah, somewhere.
So
90,
was there a little bit of
95.
inspiration of why you created Campendium then?
Yeah, that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, primarily it was about self-service and photos, I think, in the beginning.
Mhm.
Just where can we work? We just needed to know where we could work from. And I wanted photos.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the short.
Well, I would personally say it's become one of the top resources in the RVing community. We use it every single time we're on the road, and I don't know what we'd do without it. We found some of the best boondocking spots ever through there.
Ah,
Thank
thanks.
you guys for creating.
That's awesome.
If you have no idea what
It's a
Campendium
lot.
is, sorry.
Well, the community's been a big part of
Yeah, they're the ones
building
that
the
send in
database.
the
Yeah,
spots.
Brian can speak to that.
Yeah. If it wasn't for the community, we wouldn't have all those great boondocking spots.
Mhm.
So, thanks, you guys.
Well,
Yeah.
What are you doing?
well, awesome. Yeah, no, it's awesome. And truly, go check them out if you haven't. You'll be blown away by the resource. Thanks, community. I think community is actually a great way to kind of tie into this topic and kind of what what some of these best practices are as community. What can we do? How do we affect these lands when we use them, these public lands, and what can we do as a community to better them? Which I think is kind of a segue kind of into the policy itself. But does anybody kind of have any thoughts there, or just general ideas before we?
Shoot, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I thought you were. No, yeah, well, that really just jumping into it, we can jump right in, but I think we all saw a need for this to come together right now. Lee and Brian, as I said, 95%, so they're out there all the time, and they get reports all the time from people out in these places. And since we're out there, we saw what was happening, and there's so many more people out camping today.
Yeah, it's become more and more popular. The internet's made it more and more accessible, and then people blogging about it and talking about it have made more people want to do it, which is awesome because it is fun to do. But we felt like it was, someone needed to step up and say, it's cool, but let's take care of it, because if we don't self-police it a little bit, their way of policing it is just to shut it down, and we don't want that.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think, you know, this ties in a lot into kind of where the good neighbor policy came in from. And for those of you that don't know what the good neighbor policy is, slightly different, but along the same concept and kind of the same rationale as why it came to be. It was just really the right time, and the good neighbor policy came to be in around the late 1990s, I believe, and was kind of put on by my mom, Kathy Carr, at the time, who was kind of the spearheading that. And it was really about camping in privately owned parking lots, such as Walmart camping. So kind of similar, obviously not public lands, but the concept is we need to respect businesses and their property as RVers and do the right thing. So this kind of ties into the exact same thing, but in regards to the public lands, because of the usage, just like in the 90s, RVing was booming. It's booming again now. And so the usage has picked up and made this more of a known problem, or just something to be aware of. I guess is more of not a known problem, but just something where awareness needs to continue to grow along with the number of RVers.
Yeah, and it kind of has the same goal as the good neighbor policy. When his mom was working on that, she worked with a lot of others in the industry to get them behind it. So it is an industry sanctioned code of conduct. And so that's kind of the goal here too, is to get as many people on board with the support of other organizations and our members and any RVer in general. The more that we can follow these practices and make sure that we can keep public lands open and safe and clean for everybody.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys putting it together. We were recently, well, I guess a few months ago, when we ran into that ranger in Flagstaff. I think that's just interesting if you want to talk about.
Yes, we were boondock. I don't know if you guys are aware, but we lost a lot of the great boondocking spots around Flagstaff. Brandon and Krenza probably know about that.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were there, it's the first time I've ever seen anyone get arrested camping at a boondocking spot, taken away in handcuffs by the Forest Service rangers for overstaying their limits. Obviously, they were warned, and finally the rangers came in there and took them away. So that was odd to see. But we lost all of those sites around, close to Flagstaff, because people were overstaying their limits, and the rangers were just fed up with it and finally just shut it all down. And I don't know when those are going to come back.
Yeah, but we had a long talk with the ranger about it. You know, it was in addition to people overstaying, there's also, people garbage, and I think campfires when they shouldn't be having campfires.
And this is probably not, it's not the escapees community or the Campendium community, but people living in the forest. And that's part of the problem around these metropolitan, like these bigger city areas, where we have people domiciling in the forest. And then the only thing that the forest rangers can do is actually shut huge swaths of land down, because people cannot live in the forest and they were building structures and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have those rule breakers, right? Those outliers. I think a goal for our policy really is to focus on, the community that is more just not aware of their actions, not purposefully trying to break the rules. It's more of just making them aware of these guidelines and kind of the best practices and how to approach it, so they don't accidentally become one of these issues or
there's a lot of good information in the policy itself that a lot of people, like you're saying, they just don't know until they read it, and they're like, oh, well, it could be common sense, but it's just things you don't think about.
I mean, unfortunately, there are jerks everywhere, though. That's just
Right.
But
I think one of the biggest things is not overstaying your limit.
Yeah.
Obeying the 14-day or 15-day limits.
Because the ranger did comment, he's like, the fact that you're here enjoying the land, that's what you're doing. It's supposed to be enjoyed. Then you're moving on, and he's like, and then have fun wherever you go. But I think that's
but it's
the point.
They're that nightmare that they have of like keeping track of all the license plates and making sure people are like obeying the stay limit rules, and it wears on them, and sometimes they just want to
it's easier to just shut it all down,
So anyway,
we were all on the call with the Prescott Rangers, and something that kind of struck me was something that seems so innocent that actually causes a huge problem is people come out and there's a fire ring, and maybe they don't like where the fire ring is, or it's a little dirty, so they want to build another one, or they just want to build one because they think it's neat. Hey, it's neat, let's build a fire ring. And so they do it, and then all of a sudden the area is littered with fire rings, and people start camping around them and spreading the campsites out. And what seems so innocuous is like, I want to show my kid how to make a fire ring. All of a sudden you're causing damage, not realizing it, even though if it doesn't seem like it right now. That was a project we were all going to go participate in, was basically to go take apart fire rings in the forest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good opportunity to kind of what you're talking about. Yeah, we were on that call too, and I kind of never really thought about it before. I mean, quartzite specifically, it's one of those, like, you think about it all the time. People build fire rings, park around them and move them and stuff. So it was just one of those, like, oh, I never really thought of it that way either, just because we're so used to it.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean it's the right thing to do necessarily. So, but I think it's a good opportunity too to kind of tie into, before we go into the policy, like some of the supporters and kind of why we, you talked about this earlier about reaching out. Campendium, you guys are awesome. We're so glad that you're supporters of it, but also Leave No Trace, we just partnered with, and they're supporters of the policy for this very reason of, I think there's a lot of collaboration and education amongst us as industries leaders, to kind of learn from one another. Learning that from the forest ranger was something we hadn't thought of because we're not in that side of the world where they are. So we're trying to create those communication networks and those supports from those entities as well down the road. Now, obviously, the whole COVID and coronavirus has slowed and kind of dampened this project, which was actually launched right before all this kind of happened. So, but that should be coming back around. We are still having those communications and things, but obviously, as you can understand, it's a little slower at the moment.
But and alongside Leave No Trace, there are companies like Winnebago that want to help from the manufacturing standpoint. They're building the RVs that you're taking out there, and they want to do their part to help educate the community as well. And then you have people like Harvest Host, which was another natural tie-in because you are boondocking on other people's properties. So we are very thankful for all the supporters. I'm missing somebody. Dometic. Yes, Dometic. And they were ones we were going to help out with that Prescott cleanup project, which unfortunately got canceled with Lee and Brian as well. So I think the industry as a whole is very passionate about making sure that we keep as many opportunities open.
Yeah, I think it ties back into now is just kind of the right time for this to come into play. And it's not that we were the first on the topic, but I think where our policy differs is it's RV community specific. It's, that's what we're focused on, is who we can impact and have the most impact on. And that's obviously our members, but also the community as RVers as a whole that we kind of touch into that utilize this land. So, our big portion of the users of the land. So do we want to do we want to answer some questions or have general conversations first, or we just want to move into the policy? What do you guys want to do here?
I'm going to blast through the policy, let everybody see what it's all about.
Yeah, because I think there's going to be conversations around each point too.
And then if anybody is listening has questions about a point, needs a clarification or has a anecdote or whatever.
Right. I'm going to hit on number one right here. Number one is respect the rules of the land. So I think this is somewhat stuff we've been talking about, where you're observing the stay limits, like all the rules that have been posted, follow them.
Yeah. And some places do require permits. Most of the time they're free permits, but you need to have them. And those places that require them often have rangers looking for them.
And it ties back into, camping in that designated areas, which you were just talking about, campfires, those may not be designated areas necessarily. So, determining what is a designated area and where you can actually camp is also an important aspect of that. So, and then, also a lot of these lands differ on the laws. Some are federal, some are state, so you really need to kind of know what you're getting into depending on your activities. We'll leave it at that. But just be aware of what land you're on and who regulates that land.
Yeah.
Let's jump into number two, treasure the terrain.
So this ties a lot into the leave no trace principles. But when you're out there camping, you want to camp on durable surfaces. So typically, you don't want to drive your vehicle onto bushes and trees or anywhere where you're really going to screw up the surface. It's usually pretty obvious. And along with that, you don't want to expand the existing camping areas. That was a big problem in Sedona. People just kept, Sedona's a beautiful place to boondock, and people just kept pushing a little further, and then eventually they came in and dropped boulders in the campsites. Like, well, you can't go there now.
Yeah.
I'm sure that Lee and Brian have found a lot of that, or had to take off portion because of that type of thing too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, basically the rule is if it looks like if it's been camped on before, you can camp there. Don't make a new campsite.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can generally tell, especially Sedona. That was a good point. Is as you're driving down that road, you can see where you can pull off, what's flat, and you kind of know. So just keep that in mind as you're looking, and especially when there's groups of other people, you just generally look around and find the non-crowded areas, which is kind of another point in here with the ecosystem. There are native plants in the area, so generally leave those untouched. Don't take things or plant things around you, of course. Just be mindful of what's around you.
And it's one of those, like, well, I just cut this one little branch off, but they don't understand that expands exponentially and it starts to go bigger and bigger. It's like, yeah, you may have only cut one little tiny branch off, but if that continues to happen, then you drastically change the land, and that's the whole point.
Yeah.
We recently were camping near somebody who was they throwing an axe.
They set up an axe throwing target on a 200-year-old saguaro.
What?
Yeah. And so they were throwing hand axes at this giant saguaro on a boondocking spot.
Brian actually talked to him.
And I had to stop and talk to him. Like, you guys, that's a protected plant. You shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't throw axes at saguaros.
Yes.
But do they get good Instagram shots?
Yeah.
Because that's the important thing. Do they get good Instagram shots? Because
I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
And it was like the
I think
cactus.
really
What's the spot?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which kind of leads, the next big point here. These kind of break down into like 5 points, I believe, and there's a lot of little points underneath. You'll see it in the policy, which you can go check out on the website. But the next one is kind of respect your neighbors, and I think this is probably one of the biggest pet peeves a lot of people have.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to hear in the chat kind of your kind of what has happened regarding your neighbors.
I think there's at least one post a month, at least once a month, in the Escapers page about people who are peacefully boondocking, and somebody just rolls up right next to them.
Yeah, I think it's a funny thing in the human brain, because people are scared to boondock at first because they're scared of other people. Yeah. They're scared of some crazy person out there. But then when they roll up in a boondocking spot, they go and camp right next to a stranger.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a broken part in our lizard brain somewhere. But yeah, people are out there for peace and quiet and nature, so give them that. Spread out.
Yeah, I think one point of discussion I always see on this post is kind of think of where they're coming from. Maybe they're scared to be out there in nature by themselves, so they kind of creep up next to you. But generally, if you are concerned about the area, there's still ways to distance a little bit, and still be near other people within sight, but also just don't park like you're in an RV park when you're boondocking.
Mm-hmm. Along with that, even if you are camped together, you want to just watch like your generator noise. I know that Lee and Brian are camped with somebody who's very concerned about that. And so you guys should definitely put your generator right at them.
There he is.
And there's Marshall, half frozen in the screen.
It's one of those things where you don't want to put it right at someone else, or respect quiet hours. Maybe there's not exact quiet hours for everywhere you go, but if you maintain that general idea of like 10 to 8, you're gonna be pretty good with people.
No.
It's kind of one of those, like, just pretend you're in a campground when it comes to being respectful, right? Like, you wouldn't show up at a campground and just party all night or run your generator off. I mean, that's not a thing. So So, you know, you can kind of pretend in those ways to just be like you're in a campground. You should be respectful of your neighbor just like they are next to you. You wouldn't overcrowd. You know what I mean? It's just one of those.
I saw a comment
A little bit of common
in the
sense.
chats about dogs. So that's another point is it seems natural to just let your dog run free if you're in this open land, but you don't want them running in other people's sites. So generally, you know, follow those rules, leash them when you're around other people, stuff like that.
Yeah, and the whole idea of being in a campground even goes to like driving at campground speeds. You're not just blasting past other people in their campsite, but they might have an animal out, or a kid, or a person, or you're dusting them out. You know?
Right. Because I mean, most of these public lands, or a lot of them anyway, are in arid or dry areas where the dust is, you know, even worse. So it's just something to be mindful of and be respectful. Yeah. And then the next big topic of respect is wildlife, nature and wildlife, which is obviously a big one when it comes to public lands. It's not this is other people's homes, basically, animals' homes that we're visiting and enjoying. So we need to be respectful of these wildlife and as well, kind of not just the nature, you know, of the trees and the plants and the dirt, but also the animals and things that are happening there as well. So
we're in their homes, so you have to make sure that's where the pets can come into play, where you don't want them to go after any wildlife. And we don't want to entice and feed the wildlife, because then they become too used to us, which endangers them. I mean, we used to live out on the East Coast where the bears were, and you would always hear about bears who had become too acclimated to dumpster diving or being around campers, and they'd have to kill the bear. But we're in their space.
Yeah, another thing here is to think about your fires. People love to make campfires. Just make sure there's no burn bans in the area. Make sure your fire is completely out so you don't start a fire. And also, most places you can't move firewood around. You can't move it from one location to another because of different beetles and stuff that can endanger the trees. And also, most places you can't just go cut down trees. Some places do have rules where you can take dead wood off the ground, but if they have that rule, they'll have it posted up front. But for the most part, you're not supposed to do that.
But see, this is where I
sometimes you
start
can pull a permit.
Yeah.
Right. And this is where I start going too complicated. I don't want to deal with permits. I don't want to know a bunch of rules. Like if I just abide by, maybe I just bring my own propane fire pit. I don't have to worry about those kinds of things. You know, another recommendation in the policy is just bring something you can just turn the bottle off and it's done. They don't ash, they don't have embers, and they're just safer in general, and they're much easier to maintain. You just don't have to worry about those kinds of things. Just avoid the complexity altogether.
And we did have one wildlife agency contact us about, you know, we didn't really think about it, but so many people have hummingbird feeders because they're, you know, you see them all the time out there. And those are just as bad for the hummingbirds as it is when you're feeding bears, because if they become dependent on an area having food all the time and all of a sudden the food drives away, you know, it makes it harder on them. So, you know, they would like for people not to even have bird feeders out. Just go enjoy and observe and try not to interact too much. Sounds weird.
That's kind of all the big points, really, for the respect the wildlife and nature, I believe. We could kind of move on to the pack it and pack it out, which is exactly what it sounds like. Pretty obvious, common sense stuff here. But we'll cover some of the big ones just to make sure we're all on the same page, I think. And the first one is probably the most important, just to keep your tanks closed. Keep your tanks closed. That doesn't mean it's a little bit of gray water. No, just keep your tanks closed. That's the easiest way to handle it.
Definitely don't ever dump your black water. Ever. Do not do that. And if you want to find some dump stations, you can go to Campendium and look for the little poop icons.
And look for Marshall's face, because he's the dump station czar. He goes to all the dump stations.
You'll never forget his face now.
But yeah, there are a lot of techniques to extend your holding tanks, switching to composting toilets. You know, just there's lots of interesting techniques that we'll probably get into in a future webinar. And if you go to any of our events, there's always a talk about it. But yeah, you have to learn to conserve, and you have to learn to take less showers and use more wet wipes. And so yeah.
And of course, you're going to get your fresh
We had
water.
a
from-
neighbor at Lake Mead once.
Mhm.
We had a neighbor at Lake Mead once boondocking, and I went outside to talk to him. He was digging a trench, and I was curious what he was doing, and he was digging a trench to dump his black tank at Lake Mead National Recreation Area. I'm just like,
Yeah.
It's making me
Yeah,
sweat.
it's like they're
Yeah.
it's so crazy.
We did
But,
have
like,
in our olive group, well, in the RV to Freedom group, because now it's part of the KBs. Back when they had a vintage Airstream, and so they still had the book that came with it, and it actually talked about that.
Yeah, their question was, do you guys ever get tired of digging holes to dump your black tank? And everybody was like, wait, what? What are you talking about? And it was in their like 1969 manual for their Airstream. Dig a hole 3 feet deep, dump your tank in it. And like, yeah,
No, don't follow that.
I mean,
like Slab City.
here's where I kind of go with that, and it's like, I think it's just time to go. Like, who would? I can't imagine digging a trench over just like, I think it's time for me to leave and go to a dump station and dump over digging a ditch. Like
Yeah,
that
it sounds
just
like a lot of work, a lot of dedication.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, that's kind of the easiest way to avoid it. It's when your tanks are full, learn how to conserve a little more, and then you'll get better at it. And once they're full, it's just time to go. That's the easiest way to handle it. So
It's usually about 14 days.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, depending on your rig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And depending on you, I guess.
And how many kids you have that don't know how to properly save water.
Yeah.
But along with this, also just take everything. You know, everything you brought with you, you need to take out of there. And you should probably take some of the extra trash you find when you get there too.
Yeah. Which really kind of goes into what can you do to help. And the first thing you can do is always leave the area cleaner than you found it.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate that a lot of times we roll up on an area, there's trash everywhere, but it's just kind of part of the habit. You can see Krunza here. We were camping with Camp Addict, Kelly and Marshall, and Brian and Lee, and some others.
Yeah,
And
Kelly's
the
down
first
there
thing we
cleaning up
did
too.
before we actually set up our RVs was just park them all, hop outside, clean up all the trash.
And we even incorporate this into some of our convergences now. That's Moab. They cleaned a ton off of the runways there. And this isn't a cleanup, okay, but down in Baja, both the convergences and the hangouts, they planted trees to help with beautifying and putting
And they planted
birthday
trees
kind of stuff.
under the guidance of an organization
Yeah.
there. They didn't just go out and start planting trees. Like,
Right.
you have to work with people if you want to modify the lands. But if you want to collect trash, that's easy. Also, most of the national forests and places, they'll have trail cleanup days where they actually want people to go out and, you know, trim limbs and clean up wood and stuff like that. But you need to work with them on those things and not just take it on your own to start trimming the trees.
Yeah, and I was gonna go into just the community as a whole, you know, outside of what Escapees and Escapers is, a lot of our members take that initiative on their own. Escapees has always done that. We actually in Livingston adopt a part of the highway, or used to at least, and clean up that area. Over the past several months, I've seen a lot of Escapers members getting out there, organizing groups of people to get together and pick up trash. So I feel like the RVing community in general is very good about giving back and picking up around them. So the more we see that happening, the more proud we
and
are.
I'm sure there's countless examples that we just never hear of.
Right.
You know, there's a lot that we do know of, but I'm sure there's even more that we don't know of, and that's why this community is awesome. And you know, this policy is not really directed at anybody. Obviously, this is one of those help spread the word.
Well, I thought we were
You know, help us get this out there and kind of just set some better guidelines, formal guidelines for the RVing community, which I don't think we've ever really seen anywhere. And this just gives a blatant example for somebody in a nice way to use this policy, walk up to a person they see maybe not doing the right thing, and use it as an educational tool, not a scalding or, you know, unfriendly manner, but it's a way to hand them and kind of just educate them or send them some references or resources of how to you know, properly camp.
Yeah.
Paul says he even tries to pick up trash around the Walmart parking lot and see if they're overnight. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good way to tie in the good neighbor policy and this policy.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think you hit on a good point there, Travis, is use these policies to make things better. Don't use them to judge people and pick on people and post pictures of them on Facebook. Like, go have a nice conversation with the person and try, you know, and if you can't change the person, you can't change the person. You know, maybe you'll have to pick up their trash when they leave, but you know, we got to do what we can because there's not enough people to manage all these lands, and when they get overwhelmed, they just start closing them.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah, and as so many people are, like we said earlier, are hitting it. This is like just a privilege of ours, right? This isn't really like a right. This is something we should just want to take care of and continue to have for, you know, the foreseeable future as something that we can all use. And if we don't maintain it, take care of it, and do the right thing, or at least the majority of us, you know, then that's just a real possibility that we're going to lose those opportunities more and more.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's just kind of how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, with the national parks in particular, there's not a ton of boondocking in national parks, but there is some. But, you know, a lot of people do think they're national parks, they're our parks, they're ours to use, but they're not really. The land is managed for future generations. So the land is managed for the land's sake, and the rangers are there to protect the land. And if that means restricting the people to make the land survive, they will do that. And so, yeah, it's not a right. They are there to manage the land. And recreation is a huge part of the land's use, hunting, fishing, hiking, biking, camping, all of those things. So there's a lot of people fighting to keep it active for recreational use, but you know, we still have to make sure that we keep it active. Otherwise, you know, they can restrict it. And that's one of the cool things about this country is that we have so much land available for this.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would agree. And I think, you know, one thing that we kind of aspired, nothing's been formally done yet. You know, we had the conversations and plan to work with Dometic on their Prescott cleanup project, which unfortunately had to get put on hold, but it is hopefully going to take place in the future. But also in addition, I mean, we really hope that we can integrate more opportunities, you know, within our own events, convergences, escapees hangouts, or whatever they are, style events that we can also, but in addition, we hope that we can work with BLM and National Forests to kind of organize some more volunteer cleanups, and so forth in the future as well. You know, that way it's not just you by yourself, like, where do I go? What do I do? Like, how do I really have a meaningful impact? So we're going to hopefully create those resources for everyone as well. I can't speak to a timeline on that, obviously, but
I think that'll be a way to make a big impact. You know, we're talking about the little things we can do every day when we go to a boondocking site, pick up trash, don't mess with the nature, stuff like that. But we hope to, like you're saying, provide these larger opportunities as a community building experience and also a way to give back to our lands.
Yeah, I think we were talking to the ranger in Prescott that, again, we didn't get to do, but I think them getting to know the RVing community, our RVing community, changes their perception of us too. And, you know, they'll be more willing to work with us, and, you know, maybe they just need to know who to talk to also, you know, like if they know they can talk to somebody to hopefully have somebody help them, then maybe, you know, we can keep things going pretty well.
Exactly. So there's actually quite a few comments kind of going on the side. I haven't really been paying attention. I apologize.
I think something got stuck here on our side, but you guys can, so just so you know, the policy, we have it up on the screen, of course, where you can type it in directly, but if you just go to the website and you click on the community, it's at the bottom of the community little tab at the top. So you can always go find it. You can download it if you want to share it with somebody, anything like that, where you can download PDF or just share the blog post about
Marshall
it.
likes the idea of using his face as the dump station icon.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious what other success stories or cleanups or things have, you know, the community, have you guys seen, or who's done something, organized something that may have not gotten credit, or just to kind of show that there's a lot of positive stuff happening out there too. And so it doesn't sound like everything's bad. I would love to hear, some call outs or shout outs for some people that you guys watching have seen out there recently or not recently. It really is irrelevant.
Yeah. And if you're watching this later, still feel free to comment. We'll be keeping up with those after the live show. So
yeah, we love to hear the good news, guys. We love it.
Yeah.
We hear the cleanups and the good things happening.
Yep.
Lee and Brian, have you guys heard of any big cleanups going on or anything?
Nothing big. It's more individual.
Not
Like
recently.
I would, I'd shout out Carolyn, escaper, Carolyn Karstens. Every time she walks, she brings a bag with her to clean up. So she'll walk, one direction and not pick up, and then on the way back to her rig, she'll pick up. So I think that's cool.
She does a great job.
Yep.
I love that.
The talking have to say.
What do you have to say,
After the escapers Halloween converse, a bunch of us were at Government Wash, and we more than filled up an entire pickup truck bed full of trash.
Yeah.
And the thing with Government Wash is they actually give you dumpsters right there, easy access. So it's incredible the amount of trash that's out there anyways.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I remember seeing that story on the group page, and actually there's something coming of that. This hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
I can't say anything, but
Very proud of you guys.
And Eric, thanks for commenting. Eric left a comment.
this is me commenting.
He's good at that.
Clown. And I've seen some groups organize cleanups around quartzite. They'll bring in a dumpster and organize a group to go out and clean up. So that's, it's cool. A lot of people are doing it. Be good to get a lot more of it going. But if we all do it a little bit, I think it's even better than the big individual cleanups. If we're all doing it all the time, a little bit, it builds
We're
up.
all Carolyn and just take a walk with the bag and clean up.
Yeah. It could just be that Walmart bag that we all carry in a big bag of stuff.
One bag
thousands of
full
them
of bags.
Just take one of those as you walk around, walking your dog on, on a leash, and just pick stuff up as you see it.
Paul said about 10 of us picked up 8 garbage bags and a tire from Joshua Tree South a few months ago. Yep.
That's awesome.
And that's a nice area to pick up because there's the Joshua Tree South where we were, and there's kind of that ditch on the side. And I noticed when we're there a lot of things can build up there from the wind blowing it. So yeah, that's awesome. Not awesome that there's trash, but awesome that you picked it up. I was
Direction.
yeah.
Yeah, Robert just cleaned out all the fire pits around him at AGM. So that's fantastic. So we're just talking about fire pits. But all of these great examples. And, for Earth Day, as we're talking about this is why it's partially why we have the RVers Boondocking Policy to take care of the Earth, because we only have one.
Yeah.
And so doing all these cleanups, and even the hangout cleaned up 27 pounds of, 27 pounds of blend.
Yeah.
So the hangouts don't mess around. They don't even clean the top of the earth. They clean the inside of the earth too.
Yeah.
So they arranged with the National Park Service to clean up Carlsbad Caverns. They have to go in. Carlsbad Caverns has to do this all the time. They have to go in and pick the lint off of things because they don't have any airflow or air exchange. So when everybody's walking around down there, it collects on everything. And so they had to be specially trained. Don't go do this without training and supervision, but they had to be trained to go and carefully collect lint. And they said normally they collect 19 pounds in a year, and they pulled 27 pounds in 4 days. So those are some good.
Sounds like escapees per usual, out overdoing it.
And like she said, like Cheryl said on the comment, they're going to do it again next year. So be on the lookout for that event.
That's right. So everybody can help. And I do like Chris's idea here too. For positive reinforcement.
Sure.
Give them a beer. Yeah.
Like a Pavlovian response. Like every time you pick up trash, you get a beer.
Oh, that's funny.
Is that no?
Yeah, so if anybody have anything else, but like I said, I think it's a great Earth Day topic and something that we want to not just focus on for Earth Day, but throughout the year, throughout when we start moving again and boondocking a little bit more.
Yep, I agree. I'm sure we're going to have this talk again on a future virtual campfire at some point, because we do have more planned regarding the topic and more ways that we can kind of improve it and have a more meaningful impact. So more to come, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it again, or some fashion of it again. It's kind of one of those topics that never dies because it's something that we always have to do. So.
Nice. Hey, I want to give a quick shout out here. I'm just looking at the comments. We've got Dawn going full-time in 8 days. So welcome to the cult.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
And Kelly Hall just bought an Airstream today. So
wow.
you're not right. Why come to us first?
Congrats.
Yeah,
Lee and Brian are an Airstream.
That's awesome.
We miss ours very, very much.
Well, they're in Marshall's RV right now, but normally they're in an Airstream.
Yeah.
Well, we miss it, but we also
Marshall's closer to the Wi-Fi.
Yeah. There's 2 Airstreams parked right outside. Our friend's Airstream, regular trailer, and then their ugly Airstream van is over here too.
Awesome.
One other thing, just before we leave, Paul said that they've also been trying to reduce their waste by getting rid of single-use plastics and paper plates. A little more water to wash, but less trash.
Yeah.
Another good Earth Day tip.
Yeah, if you guys have more tips you want to share with each other, drop them in the comments. So the new people that are new to boondocking or interested in it, they can, they can catch comments. Yes, Laurie, it's so ugly that only a mother can love it. Laurie is the owner of the ugly Airstream.
That was a fast response too.
If you are going to leave comments or suggestions, though, just read the policy first. Make sure what you're suggesting doesn't contradict the policy.
Yeah.
And then, but feel free, honestly, guys.
Is that outrage from the next room?
Yeah. I think I heard her scream in there.
And also we've got the policy in the comments here, so you can get a link to it and just go there and read everything about it. And even if you want to read a little bit more about expansion on all of these ideas, there's a great blog post that talks about all of this. That's a nice read and has some pretty photos.
Mark Nemeth, who is a very avid boondocker, wrote that article supporting this policy, and he's many of you probably, I don't know if you may or may not know Mark Nemeth, but he is the used to be the boot camp director or education director. Now he's the technical advisor, and he kind of is here and there with his expertise, but he's a wealth of knowledge, and he shared his experience and kind of all his stories with boondocking.
He was instrumental in starting the Smart Way program as well. So, and he still comes to events like Escapade, Annual Bash, speaks and educates where he can. So he's definitely welcome.
And if you guys are looking for cool boondocking spots to put these policies into practice, you go to campendium.com and you click on, was it free camping?
Yeah.
There's
free camping works.
Free camping works.
Or just search an area and filter by free.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brandon.
That's how we find it. Or we just like, hey, Brian and Lee or Marshall, where are you at? We'll just come where you are because you're going to be in the spot.
Yeah.
And
hey,
sorry. Just want to let everybody know that there is a happy hour this Friday if you're creating some more virtual connection there where you get to be on camera too. David and Cheryl's been talking in the comments there. Our Hangout directors they will be hosting a happy hour this Friday, and you can get the information on the website on escapees.com or on the Facebook events tab on the page. And then Saturday, we have another quarantine live, and this one is actually going to be an Escapers showcase because 2 community members are going to be playing 2 different sets. So we have Arlo, and he'll be playing the guitar, and Scott, who plays the ukulele. And they'll be play a different set, and we might even have a guest come on and do a performance if we can get her.
What's Melanie gonna do?
Nothing good, I can tell you that.
You gotta say how. Make sure she shows up and comes. And just feel free to show up. But yeah, come and hang out. I think the happy hours and the quarantine live stuff has been a good distraction and a good way to connect with everyone during the past few weeks.
Yeah,
I would agree. Massive thanks to the event hosts for
yeah,
kind of putting those on and making those happen.
and our marketing team.
And marketing, obviously. But,
Yep.
but yeah, I agree. And, I mean, and again, thank you guys so much for being on here and kind of. If you don't know, Brandon and Krantz are kind of controlling everything because they're masters of this technology.
Double duty. They're
Yes.
they're co-hosting with us and controlling.
Exactly. And then Brian and Lee, thank you guys too for making the time to get on.
No problem.
Thanks for having
Stressful
us.
internet and for being involved in the conversation. I'm sure we're going to hear from you again, and Marshall,
Oh,
you
and
too.
Marshall.
Yeah.
Right.
The worst.
Buddy. But
All right, guys. Thank you
again,
very much.
We really thank you all.
All right. Well, we will
We'll hit-
see everybody next time.
Bye.
See you guys later.
Yeah.
All right. See
Bye,
you all.
everyone.
Take care. Safe travels.